In the early hours of May 29, 1453, the thundering echoes of cannons reverberated against ancient walls that had stood for a millennium. The sound of prayers intermingled with war cries as two civilizations stood on the precipice of destiny. Dawn broke over the Bosphorus, casting golden rays upon the waters that had witnessed centuries of history. Within the mighty walls of Constantinople, the last bastion of the Eastern Roman Empire, Emperor Constantine XI Palaeologus walked the ramparts of Theodosius one final time. Below him, 50,000 Ottoman soldiers prepared for what would become their final assault. Behind him lay 1,000 years of Greco-Roman culture, waiting to witness its last day. The air was thick with the scent of incense wafting from Byzantine churches, mingling with the salty breeze from the sea. The magnificent Hagia Sophia stood proudly, its golden domes reflecting the rising sun. The once bustling markets lay silent, their empty stalls still bearing traces of Chinese silks, Indian spices, and Arabian perfumes. Sultan Mehmed II, merely 21 years old but burning with ambition, had spent 2 years planning this siege. His massive cannons, designed by Hungarian engineer Urban, could hurl 600-kilogram projectiles against the ancient walls. The young sultan, a polyglot and scholar, dreamed of surpassing Alexander the Great's achievements. As the morning progressed, the assault intensified. At first light, waves of less experienced troops charged the walls, followed by elite forces. The defending Byzantines fought valiantly, but their numbers were few. Genoese and Venetian merchants had converted their ships into barricades, while women carried stones to repair the damaged walls. Monks hurriedly copied ancient manuscripts, desperate to preserve centuries of knowledge. The decisive moment came near the Kirkaporta Gate. A small breach became the Ottoman army's gateway into the city. Emperor Constantine XI, removing his imperial regalia, chose to fight as a common soldier rather than surrender. His last reported words echoed through history: "The city has fallen, but I live." By nightfall, the Eastern Roman Empire had ceased to exist. Hagia Sophia, for nearly a millennium the greatest church in Christendom, would soon become a mosque. Constantinople would be reborn as Istanbul, the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. The city's fall marked not just the end of an empire, but the dawn of a new era. Scholars fled westward, carrying with them precious manuscripts and knowledge that would help fuel the Renaissance in Italy. The Ottoman control of trade routes would push European powers to seek new paths to the east, leading to the age of exploration. The synthesis of Turkish and Byzantine cultures would create a unique architectural and artistic legacy that still stands today. The fall of Constantinople was more than a military conquest. It was the moment when East met West, when ancient Rome finally died, and when the Middle Ages began their transformation into the modern era. The echoes of that fateful day continue to resonate through the corridors of time, reminding us how single moments can forever alter the course of human history. Like the sun that set on Constantinople and rose on Istanbul, this monumental event marked both an end and a beginning. The knowledge preserved in Byzantine libraries and carried by fleeing scholars would nurture a cultural revolution that would forever change the face of Europe, while the Ottoman Empire would rise to new heights of power and cultural achievement, creating a legacy that would influence centuries to come. As the sun emerged from the eastern horizon on that fateful morning of May 29, 1453, it painted the waters of the Bosphorus in shimmering gold, creating a deceptively peaceful scene. The narrow strait that had for centuries served as the liquid border between Europe and Asia now reflected the crimson hues of dawn, as if nature itself anticipated the bloodshed to come. Emperor Constantine XI Palaeologus, the last heir to a throne that traced its lineage back to ancient Rome, stood atop the massive Theodosian walls. These fortifications, built over a millennium ago, had repelled countless armies, but now showed the scars of weeks of relentless bombardment. The morning breeze carried the salt of the sea mixed with the acrid smell of gunpowder, while the distant sound of Ottoman war drums created an ominous heartbeat that echoed across the landscape. Below the towering walls, spread out like a vast human sea, 50,000 Ottoman soldiers prepared for what they knew would be their final assault. Their campfires dotted the landscape, their weapons glinting in the early morning light. The massive siege cannons, unprecedented in their destructive power, stood ready to deliver their thunderous blows against the ancient defenses. Behind Constantine stood Constantinople itself, the city of cities, the queen of cities, as it had been known throughout the medieval world. Its countless domes and spires reached toward the heavens, with the magnificent Hagia Sophia dominating the skyline. The morning light caught the golden crosses atop the churches, creating a corona of divine radiance. The city that had been the guardian of Greco-Roman culture for a millennium, the repository of ancient wisdom, and the bridge between East and West, was about to witness its last day as the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. In these quiet moments before the storm, Constantine could see the entire sweep of history before him. The city founded by Constantine the Great in 330 AD had survived countless sieges, civil wars, plagues, and disasters. It had preserved the learning of antiquity through the darkest of ages, its libraries filled with precious manuscripts, its workshops maintaining the artistic traditions of Rome and Greece, its churches housing the most sacred relics of Christendom. The morning birds still sang in the gardens of ancient palaces, seemingly oblivious to the impending doom. The gentle lapping of waves against the sea walls provided a peaceful counterpoint to the growing rumble of Ottoman war drums. Inside the city, the last morning prayers were being sung in Hagia Sophia, the voices of priests and people rising in ancient Greek, carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. As Constantine gazed upon this scene, he embodied the tragic dignity of his empire's final hours. He knew, as did everyone in the city, that this dawn might be their last as citizens of the Roman Empire. Yet there was no panic, no chaos, only a solemn acceptance of whatever fate awaited them. The emperor, like his city, would face its destiny with the quiet courage that had characterized their civilization for over 1,000 years. This was more than just the dawn of a single day, it was the sunset of an entire era. As the morning light continued to strengthen, it illuminated not just the end of the Eastern Roman Empire, but the birth of a new age. The world that would emerge from this day would be fundamentally different from the one that had preceded it, as two civilizations prepared to collide in one of history's most pivotal moments. The city that had been Constantinople since 330 AD was about to undergo its final transformation. The last sunrise over the Roman Empire was also the first sunrise of a new era, though none who witnessed it could fully comprehend the magnitude of the change that was about to unfold. Walk with me through the streets of Constantinople on that fateful morning, where 15 centuries of history breathe through every stone and archway. The city, once the greatest metropolis in the Christian world, now stands at its final hour, its magnificence still evident even in its moment of crisis. The morning air carries a complex tapestry of scents. The sweet perfume of incense wafting from Byzantine churches mingles with the briny breath of the Bosphorus. Bells toll from countless church towers, their bronze voices carrying both prayer and warning across the city's 7 hills. The great Hagia Sophia, architectural wonder of the medieval world, rises above all, its massive golden dome catching the first rays of dawn like a second sun. In the silent markets of the city, the once bustling stalls tell stories of a vast trading network that spanned continents. Empty wooden counters still bear the faint traces of Chinese silks, their delicate patterns having graced these same boards for generations. Spice bins, nearly empty now, still release whispers of cinnamon, pepper, and cardamom from distant India. Crystal bottles that once held precious Arabian perfumes stand like silent sentinels, their contents long since sold or consumed. The reality of siege has transformed this magnificent city into a fortress of desperation and determination. Food and water are carefully rationed, with every morsel counted and distributed with meticulous care. The wealthy eat bread made from flour stretched with sawdust, while the poor subsist on boiled leather and rats. Water, despite the city's massive cisterns, is distributed in carefully measured portions. Church buildings and monasteries have become makeshift shelters, their vast spaces filled with families seeking both physical and spiritual refuge. The sound of children's voices echoes off ancient mosaics depicting saints and emperors, while worried parents whisper prayers beneath golden icons. These sacred spaces now serve as both sanctuary and last resort, their strong walls offering protection from Ottoman bombardment. Genoese and Venetian merchants, their commercial interests tied to the city's survival, have transformed their trading vessels into floating fortifications. Their ships, once laden with precious cargo, now block strategic points along the Golden Horn, their wooden hulls reinforced with whatever materials can be found. These experienced seafarers have become crucial defenders, their maritime knowledge as valuable as their improvised defenses. Throughout the city, women of all social classes work alongside men in the desperate effort to maintain the defenses. Noble ladies and common workers alike carry stones and rubble to repair sections of wall damaged by Ottoman cannon fire. Their determination mirrors that of their ancient predecessors who helped rebuild these same walls centuries before. In the quiet corners of monasteries and libraries, monks work with urgent purpose, copying ancient manuscripts onto precious parchment. These scribes race against time to preserve the accumulated knowledge of centuries, philosophical treatises, religious texts, scientific works, and classical literature. Their quills scratch frantically across pages, preserving wisdom that they pray will survive even if the city falls. The streets themselves tell the story of a city under siege. Makeshift barriers block smaller alleys, while larger thoroughfares are kept clear for the rapid movement of defenders. Gardens within the city walls have been converted to vegetable plots, every available space used to grow food. The famous houses of Constantinople, with their upper stories projecting over the streets, now serve as lookout posts, their windows offering vantage points to spot enemy movements. This is Constantinople in its final hours, still magnificent, still defiant, but transformed by the realities of siege. The city that had been the center of civilization for a millennium now stands as a last bastion of medieval Christendom, its people united in their determination to preserve not just their lives, but the legacy of an empire that stretched back to ancient Rome itself. As the morning light strengthens, it illuminates a city that remains beautiful even in its death throes, a place where the accumulated glory of centuries still shines through the gathering darkness of its final day. The city of dreams prepares to awaken to its last morning as the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, its streets and buildings bearing witness to the end of an era. In the twilight of the Byzantine Empire stood a remarkable figure, Constantine XI Palaeologus, the 57th and final Roman emperor. At 49 years old, his weathered face bore the weight of an empire in decline. A widower without heirs, Constantine embodied the fate of his dynasty, the last of a line that stretched back through 15 centuries of Roman history. Constantine's character was forged in the crucible of imperial responsibility. Unlike many of his predecessors who succumbed to decadence, he maintained a dignified austerity that earned him deep respect from his subjects. His diplomatic skills were legendary, having spent years negotiating alliances and managing the delicate balance between East and West. Yet it was his personal courage that would define his final days. When offered multiple opportunities to flee the doomed city, Constantine's response became the stuff of legend. To surrender the city would be unthinkable. "I will die here as emperor." This was not mere bravado. It reflected his deep understanding of his role as the heir to Roman tradition and Orthodox Christian leadership. In the final hours, Constantine performed an act of profound symbolism that still resonates through history. Removing his purple imperial robes, the very symbol of Roman authority, he chose to fight alongside his soldiers as one of them. This last emperor, who began his life in purple, would end it in the simple garb of a soldier, defending the walls built by his predecessors. In striking contrast stood the 21-year-old Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, whose youth belied his extraordinary capabilities. Known to history as the Conqueror, Mehmed represented a new type of ruler, one who combined traditional Islamic military prowess with Renaissance learning and technological innovation. Despite his young age, Mehmed was already a formidable intellectual. He spoke Turkish, Arabic, Persian, Greek, and Latin fluently, often engaging in philosophical discussions with scholars from various cultures. His library contained works of history, science, and military strategy from both Eastern and Western traditions. This wasn't merely academic interest. Mehmed studied these works to understand the civilizations he sought to conquer. His fascination with military technology bordered on obsession. Mehmed personally oversaw the development of new siege weapons, including the massive bombards that would eventually breach Constantinople's walls. He studied mathematics to better understand ballistics and engineering to comprehend fortress design. The young sultan would spend hours with his artillery masters, fine-tuning the placement of each cannon. Mehmed's dream of surpassing Alexander the Great wasn't just youthful ambition. It was a carefully cultivated vision. For 2 years, he meticulously planned the siege of Constantinople, studying every failed attempt by his predecessors. He commissioned detailed maps, gathered intelligence about the city's defenses, and even had models built to test different assault strategies. The contrast between these two leaders could not have been more dramatic. Constantine, the last ember of a dying empire, dignified in decline, fighting to preserve a millennium of tradition, and Mehmed, the young tiger of a rising power, combining old and new, East and West, in his quest for glory. Their clash would mark not just a battle between armies, but between ages, the medieval and the modern, the old world and the new. In the end, this human drama played out against the backdrop of epical change. Constantine, who died fighting on the walls of his city, would be remembered as the embodiment of noble defeat. Mehmed, who succeeded in his great conquest, would transform Constantinople into Istanbul and create a new synthesis of Byzantine and Ottoman cultures that would influence centuries to come. These two men, so different in age, background, and destiny, would together close one chapter of history and open another. Their final confrontation would echo through the centuries, shaping our understanding of leadership, duty, and the great turning points of history. The Siege of Constantinople in 1453 marked a revolutionary moment in military history, where medieval warfare met the dawn of modern military technology. At the heart of this transformation stood innovations that would forever change the face of warfare. The centerpiece of the Ottoman arsenal was the massive cannon designed by Urban, a brilliant Hungarian engineer who had first offered his services to Constantinople but was turned away due to lack of funds. Urban's creation for the Ottoman forces would prove to be a technological marvel that would reshape military engineering. The Great Bombard, cast in Adrianople, was a testament to both engineering prowess and metallurgical advancement. These massive siege guns were unprecedented in their scale and power. The largest could fire stone projectiles weighing up to 600 kilograms, the weight of a modern compact car. The cannon's bronze barrel measured 27 feet in length, with a caliber of nearly 3 feet. Each firing required hundreds of pounds of powder and took hours to reload. The very sound of these weapons firing was said to be heard for miles, with contemporary accounts describing pregnant women miscarrying from the shock of the noise. Yet the challenge wasn't just in creating these weapons, but in transporting and operating them. It required teams of 60 oxen and hundreds of men to move each of the largest guns. The Ottomans developed specialized wooden platforms to distribute the massive recoil force, preventing the guns from burying themselves in the ground. They also pioneered new techniques for cooling the bronze barrels between shots, using oil-soaked leather coverings. The mobile siege tower represented another leap in military engineering. Unlike traditional wooden towers, these Ottoman versions incorporated innovative anti-fire protection. The towers were covered with water-soaked buffalo hides, making them resistant to the Byzantines' feared Greek fire and other incendiary weapons. The multiple levels of these towers allowed Ottoman archers to shoot at defenders while staying protected, and the structures could be partially disassembled and moved to different locations as needed. Perhaps the most ingenious aspect of the siege was the Ottoman approach to the Golden Horn harbor. When faced with the massive chain blocking naval access, Mehmed II implemented an audacious plan that seemed impossible to contemporaries. He ordered the construction of a massive wooden track, greased with animal fat and timber. Over one night, dozens of ships were hauled overland on these tracks, bypassing the chain barrier entirely. This operation, involving thousands of men and intricate engineering, demonstrated the Ottoman capacity for innovative problem-solving. The trench system developed for the siege was equally revolutionary. Rather than traditional siege approaches, the Ottomans constructed an elaborate network of protective trenches that allowed their forces to move safely closer to the walls. These trenches were reinforced with wooden roofs and walls, protecting soldiers from Byzantine artillery and creating staging areas for assault troops. The network was designed in a zigzag pattern, making it difficult for defenders to get clear shots at the advancing forces. Support systems for these innovations were equally impressive. The Ottomans established mobile foundries near the battlefield, allowing them to cast replacement parts and new ammunition on site. They developed sophisticated supply chains to provide the massive amounts of gunpowder needed for sustained bombardment. Teams of specialized engineers maintained the guns, while others worked constantly to repair and improve the siege works. The psychological impact of these technological innovations cannot be understated. The continuous bombardment, day and night, created an atmosphere of relentless pressure on the defenders. The sight of ships crossing land and the thunder of unprecedented artillery created a sense that the Ottomans could accomplish the impossible. These innovations represented more than just military advancement. They signaled the emergence of a new era in warfare. The fall of Constantinople's ancient walls to modern artillery marked the end of an age where static fortifications could guarantee security. The combination of massive siege guns, sophisticated engineering, and innovative tactical approaches would become the template for warfare in the coming centuries. The siege demonstrated that success in warfare now required not just courage and numbers, but also technological sophistication, logistical excellence, and engineering innovation. This synthesis of traditional military virtues with cutting-edge technology would become the hallmark of modern warfare, and it was first displayed in full during these fateful days in 1453. The early hours of May 29, 1453, marked the beginning of one of history's most pivotal moments. The darkness before dawn was shattered at precisely 1:30 a.m. when the Ottoman batteries commenced their final, devastating bombardment. The timing was carefully chosen. The defenders would be at their most exhausted, having endured 53 days of siege, and the cover of darkness would add to their confusion and terror. The night air reverberated with the thunderous roar of Urban's great cannons, their massive stone projectiles smashing against the ancient walls with unprecedented fury. The bombardment's intensity exceeded anything seen in the previous days, as Mehmed II had ordered all his artillery to fire simultaneously, creating a storm of stone and flame that illuminated the pre-dawn darkness. At 2 a.m., the first wave of Ottoman troops surged forward. These were the Bashi Bazouks, irregular troops and less experienced soldiers. Their attack, while seemingly wasteful, served a crucial strategic purpose. These warriors, though less trained, were numerous, and their assault would exhaust the defenders and reveal weak points in the city's defenses. The Byzantine defenders met them with arrows, Greek fire, and desperate courage, their ranks thinned but holding. The second wave, beginning at approximately 3:30 a.m., brought forward the elite Janissaries, the Ottoman Empire's finest troops. These professional soldiers, trained from childhood in the art of war, advanced with disciplined precision. Their attack was concentrated on sections of the wall weakened by the earlier bombardment. The fighting here was intense, with both sides fully aware that the fate of empires hung in the balance. The decisive moment came around 5 a.m., when alert Ottoman troops discovered a vulnerable point near the Kirkaporta Gate. Some sources suggest this gate had been left partially open during the previous night's fighting. Others claim a deliberate act of sabotage. Regardless of the cause, this discovery proved fatal to the city's defense. Ottoman forces began pouring through this gap, while simultaneously, other sections of the wall were being overwhelmed. The breach near Kirkaporta created a devastating domino effect. As Ottoman troops entered through this point, they were able to attack other sections of the wall from behind, creating confusion and panic among the defenders. The carefully coordinated defense began to collapse as Byzantine soldiers rushed to contain multiple threats simultaneously. By 7 a.m., Ottoman troops had secured several entry points into the city. The scene was chaos incarnate, the sounds of battle mixed with the screams of civilians, the clash of weapons, and the continuing thunder of cannons. The city's streets became battlegrounds as desperate defenders tried to establish new defensive positions, while Ottoman forces pushed relentlessly forward. It was in these final moments that Emperor Constantine XI made his immortal decision. According to contemporary accounts, when informed that the city was lost, he uttered the famous words, "The city has fallen, but I am still alive." Then, in a gesture that would echo through history, he removed his imperial regalia, the purple boots and insignia that marked him as emperor. The last Roman emperor's final actions were witnessed by a handful of survivors who later recorded the scene. Constantine, now dressed as a common soldier, drew his sword and led a final charge against the advancing Ottoman forces. He was last seen near the St. Romanus Gate, plunging into the thickest of the fighting. His body was never officially identified, though the Ottomans would later give a body they believed to be his a burial worthy of an emperor. As the morning sun fully rose over Constantinople, it illuminated a changed world. The city that had been the capital of Roman civilization for over a millennium had fallen. The Byzantine Empire, the last vestige of ancient Rome, ceased to exist. Mehmed II, now truly the conqueror, rode through the streets to the Hagia Sophia, where he ordered the great church converted into a mosque. The fall of Constantinople marked more than just the end of an empire, it was the death of an age. The medieval world, with its roots in the Roman past, gave way to a new era. The city would rise again as Istanbul, capital of the Ottoman Empire, but it would never be the same. The last day of Constantinople became the first day of a new chapter in world history, written in the blood and courage of both defenders and conquerors. The fall of Constantinople reverberated across continents, marking a seismic shift in world history that would reshape civilization as it was known. As the dust settled over the conquered city, the repercussions of this momentous event began to ripple outward, touching every aspect of medieval society and catalyzing changes that would usher in the modern world. Within days of the conquest, the transformation of the city began. The magnificent Hagia Sophia, For nearly a millennium, the greatest church in Christendom was converted into a mosque. This architectural and spiritual conversion symbolized the profound changes taking place. The city itself was gradually renamed Istanbul, though both names would be used for centuries to come. Under Ottoman rule, it would rise again as one of the world's great capitals, blending Byzantine grandeur with Islamic artistry. The immediate aftermath saw a significant exodus of Byzantine scholars westward, particularly to Italy. These learned men carried with them precious manuscripts, rare texts, and most importantly, the living knowledge of ancient Greek and Roman civilization. Their arrival in Italian cities, particularly Florence, Venice, and Rome, provided crucial fuel for the already smoldering Renaissance. The preservation and transmission of classical knowledge, long safeguarded in Constantinople's libraries, now found fertile ground in Western Europe's intellectual awakening. The commercial impact was equally profound. The Ottoman Empire now controlled the vital trade routes between East and West, including the lucrative Silk Road terminus and the spice trade passages. This control led to increased prices for Asian goods in European markets, as Ottoman middlemen added their own tariffs and restrictions. Venetian and Genoese merchants, who had enjoyed privileged positions in Byzantine Constantinople, found themselves forced to negotiate new arrangements with the Ottoman authorities. This disruption of traditional trade routes had far-reaching consequences. European powers, particularly Portugal and Spain, intensified their efforts to find alternative routes to Asia. The push to circumnavigate Africa and reach the Indies by sea took on new urgency. This quest for new trade routes would eventually lead to the age of exploration, the discovery of the Americas, and the first true globalization of trade. The Ottoman Empire itself entered its golden age following the conquest. Under Mehmed II and his successors, it would expand into southeastern Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The Ottomans created a sophisticated administrative system that incorporated elements of Byzantine bureaucracy with Islamic governance traditions. Their tolerance for religious minorities, though within strict limits, allowed for a remarkable degree of cultural and commercial exchange. In Western Europe, the fall of Constantinople sparked a radical reassessment of military technology and tactics. The demonstration of Ottoman siege artillery's effectiveness against supposedly impregnable walls led to a revolution in fortification design. The Tres Italienne, a new style of angular fortress designed to withstand cannon fire, began to appear across Europe, changing the face of warfare and urban defense. The psychological impact on European Christianity was profound. The loss of Eastern Christianity's greatest city created a sense of vulnerability that would influence European politics and culture for centuries. This trauma contributed to the strengthening of European identity in opposition to Ottoman expansion, while simultaneously spurring internal reforms within the Catholic Church. The intellectual consequences were equally significant. The influx of Greek knowledge into Western Europe accelerated the humanist movement, which emphasized classical learning and rational inquiry. The printing press, recently invented, helped spread these ideas rapidly across Europe. The combination of Byzantine scholarship, humanist thinking, and new printing technology created an intellectual revolution that would help define the Renaissance. This transformation marked the true end of the medieval period and the beginning of early modern history. The fall of Constantinople served as a catalyst for changes that had been building for decades. The rise of gunpowder empires, the shift of commercial power from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, the revival of classical learning, and the emergence of new forms of political and social organization. The world that emerged from this pivotal moment was fundamentally different from what had come before. The fall of Constantinople, while marking the end of the Roman Empire's last vestige, paradoxically helped birth the modern world through its far-reaching consequences in commerce, culture, technology, and ideas. This great pivot point in history demonstrates how endings and beginnings are often inextricably intertwined, and how the death of one era can serve as the midwife to another. The fall of Constantinople continues to echo through the corridors of time, leaving an indelible mark on human civilization that resonates to this day. This pivotal moment created ripples of cultural exchange and transformation that would shape the modern world in ways both subtle and profound. The preservation of classical texts by fleeing Byzantine scholars represents one of history's great ironies. The catastrophic fall of Constantinople paradoxically ensured the survival of ancient knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. These refugees, carrying precious manuscripts and centuries of scholarly tradition, found sanctuary in Italian cities. Their arrival sparked an intellectual renaissance that would transform European thought. Works of Plato, Aristotle, and countless other ancient authors survived because of this dramatic exodus, forming the foundation of Western intellectual tradition. A remarkable cultural synthesis emerged in the transformed city of Istanbul. The Ottoman Empire, rather than erasing Byzantine culture, absorbed and adapted many of its elements. This fusion created something entirely new and magnificent. Ottoman architecture, exemplified by the works of Mimar Sinan, combined Byzantine architectural principles with Islamic aesthetics to create structures of breathtaking beauty. The great mosques of Istanbul, with their cascading domes and soaring minarets, bear witness to this remarkable synthesis. The influence on Renaissance art proved equally profound. The Byzantine artistic tradition, preserved in icons and manuscripts, influenced Italian painters and sculptors. The gold-ground technique, the formal arrangement of figures, and the use of perspective in Byzantine art found new expression in Renaissance masterpieces. Artists like Bellini, who visited Constantinople after its fall, incorporated Eastern elements into their work, creating a new visual language that would define European art for centuries. Modern diplomacy owes much to this period. The complex negotiations between the Ottoman Empire and European powers established diplomatic protocols still in use today. The concept of permanent embassies, diplomatic immunity, and formal international relations emerged from this era. The Ottomans' sophisticated system of international relations became a model for European diplomatic practice. In contemporary times, Istanbul's role as a bridge between East and West remains as relevant as ever. The city's strategic position, straddling Europe and Asia, continues to make it a crucial nexus of global politics and commerce. The preservation and restoration of its historical monuments, particularly Hagia Sophia, raises ongoing questions about cultural heritage and religious identity that resonate far beyond Turkey's borders. The debate over cultural preservation versus adaptive reuse finds powerful expression in Istanbul's monuments. The recent reconversion of Hagia Sophia from museum to mosque highlights the continuing tension between different visions of cultural heritage. This controversy reflects broader global discussions about how societies should preserve and interpret their historical landmarks while accommodating contemporary needs and beliefs. The legacy of 1453 also influences modern geopolitical discourse. The fall of Constantinople represents a powerful symbol in discussions about civilizational change and cultural interaction. Scholars and political thinkers continue to draw parallels between this historical event and contemporary global transitions, particularly regarding the shifting balance of power between East and West. The cultural dialogue between Orient and Occident, so dramatically altered by Constantinople's fall, remains a central theme in international relations. The city's legacy demonstrates both the possibility and challenges of cultural synthesis. Modern Istanbul stands as a living testament to how different civilizations can coexist and create new forms of cultural expression. Questions of identity and belonging, so crucial to the events of 1453, continue to resonate. The transformation of Constantinople into Istanbul raises enduring questions about cultural continuity and change. How do societies maintain their identity while adapting to new realities? How do they honor their past while embracing their future? These questions, first posed in the aftermath of 1453, remain relevant in our globalized world. The strategic importance of Istanbul in contemporary geopolitics mirrors its historical significance. Control of the Bosphorus remains crucial for international commerce and military strategy. The city's role as a cultural and economic hub continues to make it a vital center in regional and global affairs. Perhaps most importantly, the legacy of 1453 teaches us about resilience and renewal. The fall of Constantinople marked both an ending and a beginning. It demonstrated how civilizations can adapt, transform, and create new syntheses even in the face of dramatic change. This lesson in cultural resilience and regeneration remains particularly relevant in our rapidly changing world. The events of 1453 remind us that historical transitions, though often traumatic, can lead to unexpected cultural flowering. The interaction between different civilizations, even in moments of conflict, can produce lasting contributions to human culture. This understanding offers valuable perspective on contemporary global changes and challenges. As we face our own era of rapid transformation and cultural exchange, the legacy of Constantinople's fall provides both warning and inspiration. It reminds us that civilizational change, while inevitable, need not lead to cultural obliteration. Instead, it can foster new forms of expression and understanding that enrich humanity's collective heritage. As the dust settled over the conquered city in the summer of 1453, the world stood at the threshold of transformation. The sun that set on Constantinople indeed rose on Istanbul, casting its rays upon a landscape forever changed, yet eternally enduring. This transition, marked by both tragedy and triumph, would become one of history's great pivotal moments. In the immediate aftermath of the conquest, the city began its metamorphosis. The streets that had echoed with Greek and Latin prayers now resonated with the call to prayer from newly erected minarets. Yet beneath these apparent changes, the essential character of the city, its role as a bridge between worlds, remained unchanged. The Ottoman conquerors, displaying remarkable wisdom, chose to preserve and adapt rather than destroy, creating a new synthesis that would enrich both Eastern and Western civilizations. Like seeds scattered by a strong wind, Byzantine scholars fled westward, carrying with them not just precious manuscripts but the living memory of an ancient tradition. These learned men, finding refuge in Italian cities, brought with them something more valuable than gold knowledge. Their arrival in Florence, Venice, and Rome was like rain falling on fertile soil. The classical texts they preserved, the philosophical traditions they maintained, and the artistic techniques they transmitted would help spark the great cultural flowering we now know as the Renaissance. The libraries of Constantinople, though many were lost in the chaos of conquest, had already served their purpose as preservers of ancient wisdom. For centuries, they had safeguarded the intellectual heritage of Greece and Rome, keeping alive the flames of classical learning through the medieval period. Now, through the diaspora of Byzantine scholars, this knowledge found new homes and new audiences across Europe. The works of Plato, Aristotle, and countless others, long preserved in Constantinople's scriptoria, would now inspire a new generation of thinkers and artists. In time, Istanbul would rise to new heights of splendor under Ottoman rule, becoming once again one of the world's great cities. The Ottomans, as heirs to both Islamic and Byzantine traditions, created a sophisticated urban culture that preserved the best of both worlds. Their tolerance for religious and cultural diversity, though within limits, allowed the city to remain a crossroads of civilizations. The legacy of this transformation continues to resonate in our modern world. Istanbul, straddling Europe and Asia, remains a symbol of cultural synthesis and bridge between civilizations. The questions raised by Constantinople's fall, about cultural identity, religious coexistence, and the nature of civilization itself, remain relevant to our contemporary discussions of globalization and cultural change. Within the transformed city itself, a remarkable cultural fusion began to take shape. Ottoman architects, studying the great achievements of Byzantine builders, particularly Hagia Sophia, developed new forms that combined Islamic and Roman traditions. The result was a flowering of architectural genius that would produce some of the world's most beautiful buildings. The great mosques of Istanbul, with their cascading domes and soaring minarets, stand as testaments to this creative synthesis. The fall of Constantinople also set in motion changes that would reshape the global economy. As traditional trade routes came under Ottoman control, European nations began looking for alternative paths to the east. This search would lead to the age of exploration, the discovery of new worlds, and the first truly global economy. The city's fall thus indirectly contributed to one of history's great expansions of human knowledge and interaction. The Renaissance, sparked in part by the dispersion of Byzantine knowledge, would go on to transform European society, leading eventually to the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, and the modern world as we know it. In this way, the fall of Constantinople, while marking the end of one era, served as the catalyst for developments that would shape the centuries to come. Perhaps most importantly, this historical moment teaches us about the resilience of human civilization. The end of the Eastern Roman Empire did not mean the death of its cultural achievements. Instead, these achievements were transformed, adapted, and incorporated into new forms that continue to enrich human culture. The sun that set on the Byzantine Empire rose on a world forever changed, yet one in which the achievements of the past continued to inspire and inform the future. This great historical pivot point reminds us that endings are often also beginnings, that cultural heritage can survive even the most dramatic changes, and that human civilization, like the great city itself, has an extraordinary capacity for renewal and regeneration. The legacy of Constantinople lives on, not just in the physical monuments of Istanbul, but in the continuing dialogue between East and West, in the preservation and transmission of knowledge, and in the endless capacity of human culture to adapt, survive, and flourish in the face of change.